Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Calibrate Show. My name is Hunter France. Today, we've got a closing episode for the Olivet Discourse. Take a sip of my tea and an introduction into kind of where this is going to go from here. So stick around after the bumper. Introverted but willing to talk about Jesus. Welcome back. Once again, that is my brother's band, The Sauce. You can check him out at their YouTube channel or at Mr. Rock and Roll with his reaction channel to rock music and whatnot. That is his band covering CCR's Bad Moon Rising. Check him out. They're pretty good, if I do say so myself. As I said in the intro, today we are going to wrap up the Olivet Discourse. I'm not really going to go into a bunch of details. I'm just going to speak my mind because we are going to talk about the judgment that is to come. And just in a sort of a humble way, I really just kind of want to talk through why it's so important and the idea of wrath as a part of God's righteousness and character. And I mean, because, hey, the Bible has a lot to say about it, and so much to say that if we really got into the details, this would be way too long of a video. So I'm going to hop right into it. The end of the Olivet Discourse, this is around Matthew. All right, so we're going to start here in Matthew 25, verse 31. I should have already had this up, but this is about the judgment, and Jesus reiterates his coming with the angels. He's back in Matthew 24. He talks about this, the coming in power and glory. You will see me. We went through all of this in another video, but he's saying it, he's restating it. He says, when this happens, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and I'm reading out of the ESV, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. This is the throne of David in Jerusalem. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep on his right, the goats on his left. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." This is, again, the resurrection. This is the millennial reign. Now we get to live in his presence. This is the fulfillment of the Hosea prophecy. On the third day, they will live in my presence. Strike the shepherd, scatter the sheep. And there's a 3-day prophecy there. And it's a day is 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is a day. Verse 34 or 35. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. And what did they say? Yo, Jesus, when did we do this for you? And he says here in verse 40, he says, the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. And I want to stop. What does he mean by when you did it to the least of these, my brothers? I've heard it two different ways, and I actually think it's true one way or the other. During the time of Jacob's trouble, and Israel will be invaded from the north, and the Jews will be once again scattered to the nations, and there'll be a remnant within Israel, and there will be but the remnant that comes up out of the wilderness with Jesus in the end times, they have fled to the wilderness because they listened to Matthew 24. They listened to the prophecies. When you see these, flee to the mountains. So they're going to come up out of those. But again, they're scattered everywhere. They've been put in prisons. They're being starved. And I believe he will judge the nations based on how they treat. And when I say nations, it's the people of the nations. It doesn't necessarily mean that like America is going to be here. We may or may not. I know in Daniel there's a reference to these beasts, and they're allowed to live for a while. And they're representative of nations in the end times. And it's like, okay, so they're allowed to have life. I believe that Jesus will be judging people based on how they treat the Jews during the time of Jacob's trouble. Because he says, the least of these, my brothers. This is like a reference to Joseph and his brothers. But he's identifying with the poor here as well. I think, I've heard it only taught this way. They say Jesus identifies with the poor, and he does. You can just Google scriptures about the poor in the Bible and how God sees them. He identifies with the poor. I just think here in this moment, Jesus is both talking about the poor, but he's really also talking about during the end times, how are you going to treat the Jews? I do believe that. Think of the church that I've talked about before, that it's the old World War II story where there's Jews being arrested, put in prisons, or even shot, being massacred outside in this town. And what does the church do? Turns the music up. Oh, they don't have the electricity. But they just sing. They were told to sing louder to drown out their cries for help because it's disturbing our peace. And God gave us peace, and we can't let that get disturbed. So let's just sing louder while they're being persecuted. That's a dangerous place to be. If your heart is in that spot, it's a dangerous place to be. He will say to those on the left, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you did not give me a thing." He goes through the whole thing again. I was hungry, I was naked, I was in prison, you never visited, you didn't clothe me, you didn't feed me, you didn't do anything for me. And the people on his left are going to say, "When did we see you with all these issues?" And he says, "Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me." So what's this getting at here? Remember the two greatest commandments. Love God with everything, every fiber of your being, and love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love God, it will be reflected in how you treat people around you. That doesn't necessarily mean you let people walk all over you, right? But loving and respecting your neighbor, really just love, because the word is love, but it's an all-encompassing word. It includes all of those things like respect. Not willing to do that. And it doesn't matter who they are, because Jesus would say in another place, if you only love your enemies, what reward, or excuse me, if you only love those who love you back, what reward do you have? The insinuation is you don't have a reward. Because he would say in another place, forgive your enemies. If you are not willing to forgive your enemies, I'll put these references below. If you're not willing to forgive your enemies, then your Father's not going to forgive you. That's a big deal. That's a real thing. I believe the church needs to talk about it more. If you are not willing to forgive those who persecute you, then you won't be forgiven. And Peter would ask Jesus, how often should we forgive someone? 7 times? And Jesus says, no, 7 times 77, or 7 times 70, excuse me, which is a reference to Daniel's prophecy about the end of the age. He's saying forgive until the end of the age. Forgive forever. Just keep forgiving. But it goes even further than this. So really think about for a second, because this idea of wrath as part of God's righteousness, and when you read like in Isaiah where the Messiah is coming up from Edom and he's got blood, and it's not his blood. He specifically says, "This is the blood of my enemies. I trampled them under my wrath. I killed them." This is loving Jesus killing people. He's going to take lives. He personally kills the Antichrist by the brightness of his coming. And it's a targeted. He chains the devil in hell for 1,000 years. The false prophets taken with the Antichrist. They're both cast into the lake of fire. And you read in Revelation about this blood over a big piece of land. This is off the top of my head. I told you I'm kind of just walking through this mentally. But there's blood of people being judged under the wrath of God, and they say it's like up to a horse's bridle, and it's covering a pretty good plot of land. That's violent. This is loving Jesus. How do we wrestle with this? This idea of this kind of wrath being part of his righteousness. And this is hard. This is hard for me, being someone who has been like a yes man most of his life. It's really tough for me, and I'm not confrontational, so I have a hard time with it. So I'm always asking God, like, man, why? But it always kind of comes back to this. The punishment of sin is death. Because, I mean, you look at the world right now, and I don't want to get into a highly pessimistic view of the world. There's beautiful things on the earth, right? The birth of a child, the love between a husband and wife, the love between mother and son, father and daughter, father and son, and how these things transpire. There's beautiful things. The Grand Canyon, Hawaii, that's beautiful. And then there's wonders that we can look at in our weather and in our patterns under the ocean. We don't really even need to go into outer space to see wonders. And then there's outer space. But the earth right now, and this is true, has more slavery. I think it's like, should I say per capita or just on average, there's more slavery today than any other time in the world ever. And it's not close. And it's mostly sex slaves. You got the pornography industry. We've opened doors. We're probably not going to be able to close again. You got war is increasing. It's not decreasing. It's increasing. As time has gone on, humans have gotten really much better at the art of war. And when Jesus comes, all of this greed and corruption that's turning things into slavery, there's economic slavery, there's racism, there's murders, mass murders, and just vile hatred among the nations. And you see how that's manifesting. Well, Jesus comes and like puts an end to it all. And it's a violent end. You think of, I've mentioned before, I'm kind of a nerd. You think of like Goku versus Frieza, and when Goku didn't kill Frieza and Frieza comes back, this is like a common trope in Dragon Ball, like, Goku is so naive. He's going to kill more people. This is kind of goes back to the argument of like Batman and Joker. Like Batman won't kill Joker, but Joker is he's killing people. He's devastating the city, and more people keep dying. Well, Jesus, this is the other thing. It's like John sees the scroll and no one's found worthy to open it. This is like Jesus taking a stand against the ultimate evils of the world, the ultimate powers, and defends us and kills them. He finishes the job and ushers in an era where, again, in the millennial reign, it says they will no longer even learn the art of war. They will beat their swords into plowshares. All the things that were used for war are going to be used for progression, things that will be good for the earth, good for each other. And we won't even learn how to fight anymore. It'll be peace. It'll actually be world peace. And there's more to come at the end of the 1,000 years. That's not really mentioned so much in the Olivet Discourse that I can think of. But the idea of the wrath of God being righteousness kind of comes down to that. Even the things in me will be purged away. Because I've got things that still live in me, as Paul would say. It's no longer I who sin, but sin that lives in me. Because I'm still in this flesh, and I still have these tendencies and these draws to things that are unhealthy and sinful, and I have to constantly push them away. And sometimes I don't push them away. I'll be honest. Sometimes I find myself doing the very thing I know I shouldn't be doing, or the thing I hate, and then I will find myself not doing the things that I actually want to do. And it's like a mystery, as Paul would say. And Paul, I'm basically quoting Paul, but applying it to myself. I think I get it now. At 34 years old, I think I kind of understand what he's saying. When Jesus comes, that part of me is already dead. Like this, like I count it dead now. It has died. And one day I am waiting for Jesus to come and take this body and just completely get rid of it forever. What will rise up out of the grave will be my bones and a new flesh to cover my bones. And I will be flesh and bone, and not flesh and blood and bone, but just flesh and bone and a new body. That's the idea of all of this. So the judgment of God comes on sin and pushes it away, and not everyone's making it. There's so many references into it, and we can't just skip over it. I do believe the church needs to talk about it more because it's fair and it's honest. Yes, guys, there's an end of all of the sin that is coming, and yes, we are all sinners, but if you want to live in the life where we will no longer sin anymore and it will be world peace forever, like, if you want that, put your faith in the Messiah. And that will be your reward one day. Now, by putting your faith in the Messiah and you read these words, that means your love for God will reflect in how you treat those around you. You may not get it perfect, but there's going to be this thing in you that wants to treat people with kindness. And the fight to balance kindness and niceness, they're not the same thing, but the fight to balance that is kind of a long life fight that you're going to have to learn and struggle with because it's not easy following him. It's not. His ways are so much different than ours and the way we're even taught to be. They're very different, and it's hard to do it, but it's worth it. If you don't quit, you win. That's the idea. as a believer in Christ, if you just get to the finish line, if you don't quit, you win no matter what because of your faith in him. Don't quit. Don't quit if you're watching this. Please don't quit. So I just wanted to, again, right there, and he said, those will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. This is Daniel. He's like referencing Daniel again, Daniel 12. Your people will wake from the dust, some to eternal contempt and punishment, and some for everlasting eternal peace and life and all that stuff. This is why Jesus, every time he talks about the good life and the life, I am the life, I am the way, all these references to it, he's talking first and foremost about this time period and beyond. So that will wrap up the Olivet Discourse. We're ending with the judgment there and just kind of my thoughts on it. I've said before that I wanted to get into a little bit of speculating. I don't think I do anymore. I might still do an episode on it just to kind of, in fact, let me know in the comments section if you're watching this, if you would like me to give you what I see as a scenario. I don't know if it's really helpful or not, but you guys might want to hear it. So I'm getting a phone call. I don't know. Something about talking through the end times makes me not want to speculate so much. You guys, again, let me know, and I will I'll do that episode if you guys want me to. I'll keep it very thoughtful and open to being wrong, because I have a hesitancy for things like that, because we're often wrong. And I do know we're not in the end times yet because of things like what we've said in earlier episodes, like there's no temple right now, there's no sacrifices being made. And you don't have that, you're not there yet. It's just the way it is. Last thing I'm going to say is this. I'm going to make this little announcement, and then I'm going to close the video. We'll head on out. Have a good week. In the future, I think some of my best episodes I've done in this series have been when we just kind of opened the Bible and we kind of just read through and talked through it. I think I want to do that, but maybe go back to the other prophets and just kind of go chapter by chapter. We might do an episode where 2 chapters, an episode of 1, but we'll just read through it and think through it, pray about it, and discuss it together. You can always have your thoughts in the comment sections. I'm open for all of that. So look forward to that. I look forward to seeing you guys there. Again, you can check me out on Instagram too. My brother tells me that I need to announce it, so I have an Instagram. You can follow me if you want. I'm not a big social media guy, but I do have them because I've been told that it's good to have them. Not by my brother. It's just I think my own thoughts tell me that. So come and check it out and have a little bit of fun with us. I love you guys. Come on back, and Maranatha. Come, Lord Jesus.